Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about conversations and how to engage your students in conversations to maximize engagement and to build relationships. My name is Scott, and you're watching Immediate Immersion Live, and I'll be right back with you. And welcome back. Nice to see you all here. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you are new here, do hashtag new, and if you've been here before, do hashtag returnee. And sorry that I wasn't able to record last week. I'm still recovering from my respiratory infection, so you might hear me cough along the way. The more I talk, the more active I am, the more I cough, but we're going to get through this today. So this is part of my back to basics that I wanted to do to get some people some more information, some more training on some of the basics in their classroom before we delve into some of the more complicated, the more in-depth things you can do with your students. So let's talk conversations. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them in the comments. And if you are watching this on the replay, keep your questions in the comments. I check them back regularly, and I will answer you along the way. Thank you so much for the like. I appreciate that. Please like if this video has been helpful to you. It does help me get it out to more teachers. So first of all, let me talk about what are conversations. I'll tell you that one of the things I like to do is I like to get rid of the jargon. There's so much jargon with comprehensible-based teaching that if it's not obvious what it is and you have to explain it, I don't like that kind of stuff. So back when I started teaching in 2001, and I learned about TPRS, that was the only comprehension-based instruction methodology available at the time. PQA, personalized questions and answers, was a big thing, and I was scared of it. I could not do it at all. I just skipped that step because I didn't understand exactly what it was. I mean, I knew what the words meant. I knew what people defined PQA as, but it just didn't click with me. And then fast forward about 5 years, and I read a book by Ben Slavic called PQA in a Wink. I'm not even sure if he still publishes that book anymore on his website, benslavic.com. But I read through that, and I finally had the aha moment. And that's where I learned about the classic circling with balls activity that has now been called card talk. And I started that way back when, before it was even called card talk. I had kids draw pictures on paper way back in 2005 because I didn't have all of the props that Ben had. The whole idea was to have conversations about sporting things, and then when the kid was talking about the sport, they would have the physical ball with them. Well, the problem was that I just didn't have all of the different props needed for all the different things my kids wanted to talk about. And I didn't want to just talk about sports because that excludes a lot of my kids. So we did pictures instead, especially like pictures of what you like to do and your favorite foods and such like that. And that's where I started on this ball, no pun intended, of what PQA was, and I started understanding it and involving it in my classroom a lot. It became one of my mainstays. But again, that PQA, I always had to try to explain it to teachers. What was it? And then when I defined it, they still, just like I did, they didn't wrap their heads around the whole idea. So I've renamed it conversations because that's basically what it is. You are having a conversation with one-on-one with a student in front of an audience, your classroom, and then you're also engaging the audience, your class, with that content. But it starts as a conversation. It starts at small talk. It starts at conversations you'd have at a party or at lunch. And that's the beauty of it. And everybody understands what conversations are and what conversations and small talk is. Everybody understands that it's not something that I have to define and explain and train about. Have a conversation with your students. So that's what conversations are. And they are such a mainstay of my, pardon me, of my classroom. I could not do what I do without this. And I can't believe that I went 5 years without ever having real conversations with my students. And I love this for a couple of reasons. One, it engages students in the language. I know everybody has a variety of rules about how much language needs to be spoken in the classroom, but I'll be honest, that has never worked for me. I can control only what I do. I cannot control what 34 individual students can do. So I can have the rule, I can do penalties, all different kinds of excuse me, all kinds of activities to try to get them to speak in the target language. But at the end of the day, they're individuals and they're going to do what they want. But when we're having conversations, it's much more controlled. And so they will be able to stay in the target language longer. It also is a great way to build relationships. I don't have any other goal with conversations other than to get to know my students through the language. When you try to put another goal on it, let's say, I need to teach the preterite, past tense, and I need to focus on that. That doesn't work always. It's artificial then, and it's forced, and it's not natural. Nobody goes into a party and says, I'm going to work on my subjunctive, so I'm going to try to get as many subjunctive conversations that I possibly can do. That just doesn't happen in the real world. So, we just want to have real conversations. The focus is on the student so that you are getting to know the student through these conversations. That makes it more engaging for the students, and it builds relationship and classroom culture, which is so important. Without those two things, the relationships and the classroom culture, it doesn't matter what I do in my classroom. My kids are not going to acquire language. I need to make it a safe place, a place where we have fun and we're together and we're a family, so that they will acquire the language in the least amount of stress possible. So that's why conversations and what conversations are. And let me go ahead and move that away. Okay. So my next question that people always ask is, what do you talk about? Now, the classic go-to in conversations is, what did you do over the weekend? I don't know about you, but that one gets boring really, really quick. It's really hard to make that into an interesting conversation. Most of the time, kids revert to the same things. Hung out with friends, played video games, studied, worked on a project. All of these things are boring, and you're going to lose interest. So if I'm going to do weekend talk, and now that I've progressed beyond that, I don't do weekend talk anymore. Specifically, I sprinkle it in throughout the year. So I might do it once a month. And then I talk about other things during the other weeks. Because I have a conversation day at least once a week, if not more. So if I am doing the weekend talk, I want to try. Senora Thornton says, so true. Every weekend chat, those are the answers. Yes. And it gets really boring really quickly, and we want to make it much more exciting than that. So I'm always looking for the funny when I can find a way to make things funny without putting the child down. So let's say they said they went to the movies. Okay, this could be interesting. So I try to ask leading questions. So who did they go to the movies with? They always give me their friends. Well, now we're getting into boring. Everybody goes to the movies with their friends, and that gets really, really boring. I was hoping they would say a boyfriend or a girlfriend so we could go and delve into that. But if they don't, then I tell them no. So I ask them, what did you do over the weekend? Oh, I went to the movies. Who did you go to the movies with? I went with my friends. No, you didn't. And they're like, what? Yes, I did. I'm like, that's not what I heard. I know that's the story you told your parents, but we're all friends here. You can let us know on the real secret. And the kids have no idea what I'm talking about. And then I'm like, you know what I heard? I heard you went to the movies with an insert a TV show character, an actor, a musician, a cartoon character, anything that's funny. And if the kids learn to play the game, they'll go along with you. Oh, so you went to this horror movie and you saw it with Barney. It's great. Was Barney scared? Because Barney doesn't usually do scary things. Were you scared? What's going on? Bear with me one moment. My dog wants to escape. Go on, baby girl. Problems with doing live shows. So I find the way to make it funny. Now, another classic one that I've done is this came out a few years ago with a student. I was teaching in Las Vegas at the time, and the kid was traveling to Los Angeles. To do that, you have to pass through this town called Barstow, California. It's on Route 66, and nobody stops there for any other reason, but you just left the Nevada desert. You've been driving for a while. This is the first place where there is a potty break, gas station, and food all in this one little strip of a street. So there's all kinds of restaurants, sit-down restaurants, fast food restaurants, cliquish restaurants, all those kinds of things that monopolize on the Route 66 idea. But nobody ever goes to Barstow as a destination. It's just not a place. I'm sorry if you're from Barstow, but really nobody goes there as a destination. So this kid told me that they went to Barstow or through Barstow, and they stopped at Burger King, and they met this homeless person, and they gave them a hamburger. So I turned this into a recurring class culture theme. So we made it that this kid went to Barstow as a destination, and that this was their boyfriend, this homeless person. We weren't making fun of the homeless person in any disparaging way, but it turned in that that was their secret boyfriend that they met at this drive-thru at the restaurant, and they would go and then they would share whatever meal they ordered from the drive-thru together. And so every week we'd bring up, so what else did you do with this person? So we twisted the truth a little bit. They now do not just go to Los Angeles, they go to Barstow to meet up with their secret boyfriend at this drive-thru, and they share lunch together. And so we made it a class culture that every week we would ask about the new episode. What restaurant did you go? What did you eat? Did you do anything afterwards? That kind of thing. So I took the real thing that they told me and I made it funny, and it became so popular that it was a recurring story that we kept going back to week after week after week. And it came off of Weekend Talk. My most classic Weekend Talk that I got going for a whole hour with one student. It was a home run, and it never happens like this. This is a once in a lifetime. But when I do my weekend talk, I don't take volunteers. I randomly pull out from my deck of cards of students. And this student, I got it. It was Monday morning. I opened it up and I'm like, oh, mentally, not physically. They didn't see me do that, but I was like, oh, because this kid is the most boring kid. He's the most literal. He does not play the game. When you ask him what he did over the weekend, he literally tells you, I slept, I ate cereal, I went to the bathroom, I studied and did my math homework. Boring. And so I knew I just needed to ask a couple questions and get past him really quick and go on to someone interesting. Not only that, this was during the George W. Bush's presidency, and that was his favorite person of all time. So his notebook was decorated with President Bush, all kinds of stuff. This is this man's hero. So when I asked him what he did over the weekend, he said, I went to Mexico. I'm like, what? This kid's really literal, and all the kids in the classroom knew it. So we're like, you really went to Mexico on the weekend? We lived in Vegas, so Mexico's not entirely out of the question on a weekend, but we didn't have a long weekend. It was Monday, first period, so it was very unlikely. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's finally learning how to play the game, because this is like April. And I say, oh, so you went to Mexico. With whom did you go to Mexico? He's like, oh, I went with my family. I said, did you drive or fly? He said he flew. And I'm like, what did you do in Mexico? He goes, I went to dinner with my most favorite person in the world. And I already knew who his most favorite person in the world was, because it's all over his folder. So I said, and who is that person? And he said, George W. Bush. And all the kids, because I'm telling you, this kid is very literal. He never played the game before. So the kids are like, wasn't the president at the White House this weekend? What was he doing in Mexico? Because this kid never stretched the imagination in any way. So the kids really thought, they're like, he went to Mexico on the weekend. You know, we only had 2 days. He was here on Friday. He's here first period on Monday. What is going on? And we just talked. What did you guys talk about at the dinner? What did you guys eat? Who paid for the dinner? Was it George W. Bush or was it you? We went on for a whole hour based off this story, which obviously was fictional. And at the end of the period, when the bell rang, we were still talking about it. And my kids were like, did he really go meet the president over the weekend? They really, because this kid never played the game before, finally learned in April to do that. And we just could not get enough of it. Somebody I wanted to really skip through really quickly finally learned to play the game, and we stretched that weekend talk out. It was wonderful. So weekend talk is one thing to talk about. I have, you can find on my website, I have crazy convos, a list of, in fact, let me double check what the link is and I'll share it with you. I think this is it, crazy convos. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to put it in the chat here. US Crazy Convos. So here you can download at mm.us/crazyconvos a list of like 75 different conversation topics. And I've collected these from a variety of sources. Not all of them are from my own brain. I got some of them from Wacky Chat from Martina Bex. I've gotten other ones from other Google searches on crazy conversation starters. And then I made up a lot of my own. But there's like about 75 or so, I think, on there. You can download it for free. And I also have a webinar if you go to, let's see if I put that link in here, mm.us/shop. If you go here, There's a webinar for Crazy Convos. I think it's like $27 that also goes more into depth than we're going to go here, that you can learn more about how I use Crazy Convos. But I love Crazy Convos because they're off the wall topics. And I have them, some of them are easier for like level 1 or level 2 because they're either or. Do you prefer hot dogs or hamburgers? Do you prefer Twizzlers or Red Vines? Do you prefer eating in the restaurant or going through drive-through? That was my question today for my level 2s. What's your favorite shoe brand? Those are some simple questions for like levels 1 and level 2. And then level 3, I've got some more complicated questions like what would you do if questions in there. How many sloths can fit in your room? How many Hydro Flasks can fit in the gym? Nobody cares what the answers are to these. And what I love about them is you can't prepare answers for these. So kids have to use the language that they have to answer the questions. So I love doing Crazy Convos. The kids never know what to expect. I have a huge list of them, and I just go through them each week. And as I said, they're just some really off-the-wall things. If you could only say one word for the rest of your life, what would that be? If you could have any superpower, what would it be? Things like that. All different kinds of questions, and I'm adding to them all the time, so I have an ever-growing list. But it's a great way to keep kids on their toes, to use the language that they have. So they're not, if you have conversations like, how old are you? What's your name? That's boring, number 1. And number 2, it uses rote, memorized phrases. I don't want that. I want them to be able to use all of the language in their sphere to be able to come up with things to say. And having these Crazy Convo topics do that really, really well, because there's no rote memorized phrase that can answer these questions. They have to use everything. Some of them practice numbers. Some of them, practice all different kinds of things. Would verbs is a really big one because what would you do if? That's one of a lot of ones we do for level 3. And the other things you can talk about are just everyday things. I greet my students at the door every day, every class. So I'm noticing them. Other teachers may stand out in the classroom and greet them, but they're not noticing them for who they are. So I notice if they have a smile on their face. I notice if they don't have a smile on their face. I'm noticing if they've got a new haircut or a new hair color. I'm noticing if they've got some new shoes or a new shirt. All of these things I'm noticing. I'm also paying attention to all the gossip around school. Did they win their last sports game? Who's on the team? Were they on the geography bee? Did they win? What place did they get? All of these things. These are kinds of topics you talk about at parties, at the lunchroom, at the watering hole, all of these things. And so these are what I want to bring in my classroom. So if I notice a kid's got a new haircut, guess what we're talking about that day? Forget my lesson plan, what I planned. I have something more interesting to talk about. And in a comprehension-based classroom, your only goal on a daily basis is to speak as much of the target language as possible and make it comprehended to all of your students. That's it. So it doesn't matter if I throw away my lesson plan that I had that day because this kid just came in with a bright blue haircut. I don't know about you, my kids in California, they like the primary colors and they are changing the color of their hair. So I have a guy who just had changed his hair from blue to bright red and got a new haircut to go along with it. So guess what? That's what we're talking about in that class. And I might even stretch it to another class by saying, have you seen Will? How many people know Will? What was different about Will today? And we can still have that conversation about them. because I treat all my classes as one large family that can't sit at the same dinner table at the same time. So things that happen in my first period, I talk about in my second and third and fourth period, and vice versa, so that we are one big family. And so I notice these things. Oh, this kid, like we have a kid who likes white Vans. They always get dirty. He never takes care of them. And like a couple weeks ago, we were like, oh my God, those are brown Vans now. It's time to get some new ones or put these in the wash. And then he comes in like the next day and he's got bright white ones, and we start talking about that. And then the next day, they're semi-brown already. I'm like, what? You only had them 24 hours and you couldn't even keep them clean for that. And we had the conversation about that. And all my kids were engaged in that conversation. Another student was talking about the play that they're going to be in, the school play. So we talked about that, and it was free advertising for the play. We learned what the play was about. We learned who the main characters were and which students were playing them. And so when I had another class that had one of those students who were in the play, I can say, class, I have a secret. And then I talk about someone in here is starring in the play. Anybody guess who it is? And the kid who it is always bashful and doesn't want to say anything. And so someone else, they'll guess and we have some fun. Which is another thing that you can do with your students and have conversations about secrets. And they can be completely made up secrets. You can say, class, I have a secret, and play a guessing game. And you may already have a good secret in your head, but because the kids are guessing, maybe their guess is better than what you had in your head, and you can go with it. Excuse me. So secrets are another great thing, especially if like there's secrets about other teachers. I let the teacher know we're going to be talking about them and that everything we say is all false. But the kids will get excited and go to that teacher. Oh my gosh, we learned about your secret. Sometimes getting too excited here. Sometimes I'll ask the teachers for a secret, and other times I'll say, is it okay if we make up a secret for you? And so we have all kinds of fun with that. And kids really, really enjoy that. So those are the things that you can talk about. You'll never run out of ideas. There's so many things. Even if you never touch a crazy combo and you never touch a weekend talk and you just base it on the students' lives, the sports they're in, the extracurricular activities they're in, the clothing that they wear, the music they listen to, you will never run out of ideas on what to talk about. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll answer them as they go along. Or if you have any comments about anything we're saying also. So how to conversate. It's really not that difficult. You find your topic, whether it's a wacky or a crazy convo topic, or it's what you did over the weekend, or it's I've got a secret, or you notice something about a kid. You start by asking a question, and you ask the question to the kid in particular. But just like at a party, excuse me, I'm blowing my nose here. Again. Live. You see all the blemishes with the live. Can't get away with anything. Just like in your classroom. So you start with a question. But you don't want to just stop with the question. You want to go a little bit deeper. At a party, at lunch, if you're talking about like what someone does for a living, you don't go around asking, what do you do for a living? Okay, thank you. And then move on to someone else. Oh, what do you do for a living? You ask some follow-up questions because it's small talk. So if a kid we're talking about, he's got some new sneakers. So we're saying, oh, you got some new sneakers. Where did you get them? Why did you get these particular sneakers? Who bought them for you? Did you save up your own money? Did your parents buy them for you? Were they a gift? We ask all the follow-up questions. Why did you pick that color? Why did you pick that brand? And once I've got a few questions under the belt, I now ignore that individual student and I'm addressing my classroom. Because if you only talk to the one student, the rest of the kids get bored. So now I talk about what I just learned about that kid to the class as a whole, as if they didn't just hear the conversation. They heard it. But I'm going to say, class, did you hear that? Joey bought some new shoes. Class, what kind of shoes are they? What color are they? Did he buy them himself or did his parents get them from him? And so I'm reviewing all that information with the students. Then when I'm done that, I go back to my student and I ask even more questions. You can't pre-plan questions. It's just like a real conversation. You have to just ask them as they come up and bounce in your head. And the kid's going to have to answer without being able to pre-plan the answers. This is what true proficiency looks like. It's not performance. It's not memorizing a script and following through that script. They are using all of the language skills that they can to answer these questions. Sometimes they're answering with one word. I don't care if they're doing a full sentence. That's not my point. We're just having a conversation. In real life, we don't have conversations in full sentences. Full sentences are for what we write. We write in full sentences, but we speak in short, choppy sentences, often one word, incomplete sentences. And so we want this to be as real as possible. So I'm going to ask a few more questions to go deeper, and then I'm going to go back to my class. And it's this back and forth. Whenever there's a natural lull in the conversation, or you have no more questions that you can think of to ask, then you end with that student, and then you start again with a new student if you have time left in class. My goal is not to get through every student in that class period. I will converse with each student over a period of time, multiple times. But not every student on Conversation Monday is going to be talked to. Some conversations go longer, some go shorter. I don't care. Sometimes it's only one student because it really went well. Don't care. I'll get to other students on another day. So think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. And so that's basically it. There's nothing complicated about how to converse with your students. It's just like what you would do with your friends at the dinner table, at a party, at the lunchroom, in the lunchroom. Just have a conversation. Your students are more than their grades or their behavior. They're actual human beings. And if you treat them that way, they will treat you back that way. Lastly, I want to talk about assessment. This is one of the things I use to assess speaking ability with my students. I am gathering information from multiple conversations to get a holistic picture of my students' proficiency level based on interpersonal communication. Okay? Presentational is something completely different, and I have a different way of assessing that. And I have, again, a webinar on speaking assessments that you can watch on demand at mm.us/shop. But here, I told you I call my kids at random from a little deck of cards that I make every year. So I have a little template that I make on Google Docs. It's a 2-column table, 5 rows. There's 10 names that will fit on there. I type up my kid's name and their period on each card, and I print each class on a different color cardstock and then cut them out. It's the same idea as popsicle sticks, except I'm not buying popsicle sticks. I'm buying cardstock. It's easier for me to keep them in a nice deck, and I can shuffle them up, and it works really well. And then what I love about it is on the back, I can make personal little notes so that at the end of a grading period, I can look at my little notes and then give them an overall interpersonal speaking grade. So we have a rubric that we have to use. It's an IB rubric. But I created for most everybody else, and if you go to immediateimmersion.com/resources, again, let me put that in here. And pop that on the screen. I have a copy of the rubric that you can download, and it's a conversation rubric. It's not, I have to use IB rubrics, but before that, this is what I used to use. And it looks at conversation type skills. Do they just answer the question and nothing more? Do they answer the question and then add an "and you" to try to continue the conversation? Or do they answer the question and expand upon the question? So if I say, I went to the you went to the movies with your friends? Then they go, yeah, I went to the movie with my friends. What did you do? That's more than "and you." And then they may ask some follow-up questions. Like I go, oh, I went to the movies. And they go, well, who did you go with? See how they're extending the conversation. They're doing their part to keep the conversation going. Because the "con" in conversation means with. It's something that goes together. So basically, if they just answer the questions, that would be in that mid-level grade, the C-level portion of the grade. If they're answering the questions and kind of keeping up, like the "and yous," that would be in the B level. And if they're fully engaged in the conversation and growing the conversation, that would be that A level. So I'm just making notes, like on the back really quick after I'm done copying them. Short answers, one-word answers. Just a little couple notes. I have my little key code that I use so I know. I might just put a 1 there if it was a one-word answer all the time. I just have my little code I do on the back. The kids can't read it and understand what's going on. It's not like full-fledged notes. But at the end, and we have 3 grading periods, so I mark my card into 3s so that I keep all of my ones from trimester 1 in one box, then trimester 2 in the middle, and then trimester 3 at the end. So I have some anecdotal evidence of the conversations, what we are having. And I'm going to mark them lower if they always answer in short, like one-word answers. Like if I ask them, do you prefer Twizzlers or Red Vines? And they just go, Red Vines. And that's how they always answer their questions. Then I'm going to put that down that they're a lower level speaker. But if they have a mixture of that plus some "and yous," then they might be a mid-level speaker. And then, we go on from there. So I just make the notes and then I assess them at the end from those notes. And I'm really just looking for, can they hold up their end of the conversation? It's nothing really specific. It's nothing really harsh. It's just, can they hold up their conversation? And if they can, how well can they do it? If they always answer me in English, I have a few kids who always answer me in English, which doesn't mean they don't have the language, but it means they lack confidence. So I put LC on my, is my note, lacks confidence. And then I also put a slash and I put E because they use English a lot. They also might lack confidence because they hesitate a lot and have to think before they answer. But the answer that comes out is right, but they just lack confidence in themselves. And so I want to build that confidence. So these notes help me also not only to assess where they are, but assess what they need to improve along the way. And then I will ask them leading questions to help get them where I want them to be. So that's conversations. What do you think? Any questions? Any comments? Did you find this helpful? That's all that I have to talk about. LaDonna said she came in late. It is recorded, so you can watch the recording. How often do you have conversations with your individual students? I have 1 day a week. Mondays are my day. That is my conversation day. I do it because it eases us in a very less stressful way into the week. So it just depends on the topic that we're talking about, if I'll get to all the kids that day or just a handful of kids. But over the whole grading period, I at least have in-depth conversations 3 to 4 times with each individual student. Sometimes it's more, but it's rarely less than 3. And if it is less than 3, like something came up or the student was absent a lot, I have a couple of those who are constantly sick, then I won't use theirs as a grade. I don't think it's fair unless I have at least 3 data points to use before I can give a holistic grade. But my goal is every Monday we talk about it and I get through as many kids as possible without rushing. Remember, it's not teaching language. That's not the point. The point is getting to know the students through the language. And if one kid goes for 20 minutes and another one goes for 5, that's how it goes. Great question. Any other questions or comments before I let you go? Next week, because we're going to continue with our back to basics, we're going to talk about asking stories. Because my basics of how I structure my lessons in my class are conversations, stories, and then readings. So that's what our next 2 weeks will be. We'll do stories, and then we will do readings, and then we'll talk about some specialty topics like picture talk and movie talk and things like that. Okay, I don't see anything else popping up, so I wish everybody a good night, and I will see you next week, same time, same channel. Have a good one, everybody.